Hello everyone. Well, what have we become as Western culture? If you look at it through that lens for a moment and consider that we've arrived at the place where two women of political and societal influence would say this.
We talked about the meaning of pregnancy and potential pregnancy and how that may apply
So
to
can I ask,
gender
yeah,
identity.
how do you see that applying in the Act currently to trans women?
Trans women, if someone is who applies for a job, for example,
Yes.
and it is a trans woman and she may be asked whether or not she intends to have children, and if she replies, yes, I do, and then doesn't get the job because that employer doesn't want to employ women who may be of childbearing age, then she may have been subjected to unlawful discrimination on the basis of potential pregnancy.
I'm very confused. A biological male can't become pregnant.
But the grounds of pregnancy includes potential pregnancy as well as pregnancy.
But if they can't become pregnant, how can you then become potentially pregnant?
It's about the unlawful treatment by the employer. If someone is treated unfairly on the basis of pregnancy or potential pregnancy, then that is unlawful discrimination on the basis of pregnancy.
So if a bloke came in and they said, are you going to have children? Which is the same question really, and he said, oh, yeah, maybe. Are you saying that he could also claim that ground?
If he didn't receive the job because...
But they can't get pregnant?
No, not a man who is seeking a position, then it's not going to apply to a man.
Well, how, they're both biological men. It makes no sense. A biological man, you stated before, a biological man can't get pregnant, am I correct? Because if I'm not, I've got to go back to school. I seriously do, because I missed that lesson in biology. I went to a convent school, the nuns may not have told me about it. But you said a biological man can't get pregnant.
That's correct, Senator. But someone who is a trans woman may be assumed to be pregnant or to be able to be pregnant.
No.
So what stops a man putting on a dress, walking in and claiming the protections? He's now a woman. You've admitted that.
That would be up to a court to decide whether or not it was discrimination on the basis
So it's the and with all due respect, it is the absurdity of the law yet again, which shows, again, the law does need to be changed because, for the record, biological men, doesn't matter what way you cut it, you cannot get pregnant. And quite frankly, it is an insult to women who actually are discriminated on because they want to have children when they biologically
It matters now, doesn't it?
get pregnant.
Yeah.
But the good news is, what we're proving today is
Minister for
the
Women.
law needs to be changed.
Michaelia Cash might be spot on to call out such a preposterous legal interpretation of sex discrimination law, but let's not forget that she's the former Minister for Women when there was no Minister for Men. So we're not talking about an actual gender equality advocate here doing the interrogation either. Given that this inquiry is really only born out of the Giggle v Tickle case, there's also a bit of an MRA element to it, in that there's guys that feel that Roxanne Tickle, as actually being male, is invading women's spaces as a man, as women have invaded men's sheds and the Boy Scouts, and hence have no sympathy for Salgrover either. So, and that's fair enough as well. Getting back to the potentiality of pregnancy for men idea though, and moving on from the personalities themselves in that exchange, one of my takeaways is, how do you even arrive at the place where such a concept is being debated at all? I wish I could say that it wasn't the Jews, but sorry, it was the Jews. I could go back as far as Hegelian philosophy. Hegel was a Jew, and the young Hegelians of the early 19th century, of which a young Karl Marx was then a member of, also a Jew, and the philosophical idea of the dialectic and how Hegel transformed its classical Greek interpretation into its modern incarnation. Classically, the dialectic was a way of describing the argument of two opposing views and finding a solution through reasoned debate from both sides, still bearing some semblance to Socratic reasoning. Hegel's modern interpretation was that of the thesis, the current zeitgeist, versus the antithesis, the opposing view. And from those contradictions, a new zeitgeist filters outward called the synthesis. However, Hegel's dialectic is circular in that once the synthesis is arrived at, it now becomes the new thesis, and a new antithesis is formulated to once again challenge the thesis, and hence from this another synthesis is born and the cycle continues. Today, those that don't know these types of historical contexts may just refer to this way of thinking as progressivism. As in progressivism, in the dialectic, things must continue to change. This is the method by which ideas that would sound outrageous or preposterous if presented straight up can be implemented incrementally. The antithesis component of the synthesis becomes merely an accepted part of the thesis for the new antithesis to make another assault on. If you were of a mind to create a degradation of decency in society, as Marxists invariably are, you just keep introducing micro-debasements that appear almost imperceptible. Disguise that debasement as a freedom, like as in the sexual revolution, for example, and it becomes an easy pill to swallow. When Marx's claims about workers of the world unite were tested by a crisis, the advent of World War I, for example, and people didn't unite by class when in crisis, but united with their countrymen by virtue of geography, shared culture and patriotism, and not along class lines, Marxists became disillusioned, and nationalist sentiment rose in Europe, particularly Italy, where Mussolini institutionalised fascism. In 1926, Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Communist Party leader, was jailed by Mussolini and subsequently wrote a series of papers which became known as the prison notebooks. In the same way that Marx created formulas within Das Kapital to give the impression of technical knowledge of the workings of economics, Gramsci formulated ways to identify the pillars of Western capitalist ideology so that they could be dismantled. We have to remember here that, or to my reckoning at least, socialism and communism aren't capable of demonstrating that they're a preferable choice to capitalism. They operate on the idea that the implementation of socialism is contingent on the prior destruction of capitalism, and that socialism or communism can only come about when the opponent is already dead. Rather than winning the fight, it just seeks to kill the adversary so that there is no fight, because there is no alternative. Gramsci broke Western society down into compartments that he largely put into two categories, the substructure and the superstructure. The substructure is the foundation of Western civilization, things like Christendom, marriage, the family unit and the like. The superstructure are the things built on those foundations, like education, welfare, healthcare and the media. Then there's governmental structure and, of course, the law. Gramsci sought to infiltrate the superstructure so as to subvert the substructure. He didn't believe that capitalism could be confronted head-on. It needed to be subverted through education and those subversive ideas propagated through the media. In other words, don't try and make them communists, raise them as communists in the first place. That would take time to do. It would be generational change, incremental change. Contemporaneously, in the 1920s, a bunch of Jewish philosophers had founded what we now call the Frankfurt School in Germany, due to its location. However, when Hitler came to power in the early 1930s, those Jews were stripped of their rights to teach and were exiled. Most of those Jewish philosophers of the Frankfurt School ended up in the United States, and there they founded the Institute for Social Research. They were already Jewish Marxists, but now having anchored themselves in the US, they plugged in Gramsci's ideas with Freudian psychology and a few other schools of thought. There were others, but these are the main players in developing what they called at the time critical theory. Ever heard of it? And of course, later in history, we get another of those increments I was talking about, critical race theory. You see how it rolls? Critical theory, to critique it and criticise it, to deconstruct it, to tear it down, to continually point out what's wrong with it and put this bullshit banner on it that reads social science, Jewish Marxism hiding under the mask of philosophical and psychological pedagogy. That's how I see it anyway. And there we have the real birth of the social sciences in a mainstream sense, the area of academia we now call the humanities. One of these Jewish Marxists of the Frankfurt School was Theodor Adorno, who, along with other co-authors, published in 1950 the book The Authoritarian Personality, which identified 9 personality traits that determined where they fell on what was called the F scale, F being for fascist. At the time, the Marxist characteristics of the book were massively played down in an effort to present the book as being more scientific than political. In reality, or in my view at least, it was just Marxist gobbledygook, designed for no other purpose other than to subvert the very Western principles that had given them sanctuary. Kind of like being homeless, being taken in by a kindly Christian family, but then because you're not a Christian, taking a massive shit on their rug. However you look at it, the authoritarian personality was highly influential in academia at the time. I believe that giving sanctuary to the German Jewish philosophers of the Frankfurt School was when America gave itself cancer. It let the cancer into the body. Using the same analogy, I just digress for a moment and argue that this is one of the primary weaknesses of classical liberalism. It allows for contrarian positions to be heard on equal footing. The Chinese communists wouldn't permit that for a second. Neither do theocratic Islamic societies. They crush subversion before it can metastasise. There's a strength for those structures. They're not nice strengths. They're not just strengths. They're not the kind of strengths that we want to live by or live under, but they are strengths nonetheless. As I mentioned, these subversive changes in the West happened incrementally. It was these changes to the existing social structures that led to things like the sexual revolution of the 1960s. Then we had first-wave feminism. Both these phenomena helped destroy the family unit. Birth rates declined, the divorce rate skyrocketed, single motherhood skyrocketed, and mothers who previously were supported in child-rearing by the father within the family unit now had to rely on the state for support. When you rely on the state for support, the state is more inclined to impose conditions upon you for your continued survival. Where do the leaders of the state come from? Well, mostly they come from academia, don't they? It may seem off topic for me to go there at this moment, but as you know, lately I've been doing some videos on sovereign citizens, their ideology and how they behave in court. I bring it up because whilst I started by saying I might be off topic, I don't think I am. It's just more debasement of our traditional societal norms and expectations. Go back 30 years and turn up to court wearing a hoodie and talking back to the court. 30 years ago, you'd be admonished for disrespecting the court by not wearing a collared shirt. And that was well before you even opened your stupid fucking sovereign citizen mouth. And it's the same with this potential pregnancy for biological males garbage. 30 years ago, you'd be put straight into a mental institution if you uttered such nonsense. But here we are in 2026, at the place where the debasement of society has reached the point where the law protects men from discrimination on the basis that they might want to become pregnant at some stage, potentially. Next, we'll be treating criminals like victims and focusing on their feelings rather than the actual victims, or treating women as if they have the same physical strengths as men, or claiming that laws don't apply to us and we can do whatever the fuck we like. No, wait, that's exactly what's happening, isn't it? None of these things have any basis in reality or truth, yet they're at the precipice of becoming accepted as reality and truth. It's just so 1984, isn't it? Where Winston is subjected to torture by O'Brien until he accepts and agrees on how many fingers O'Brien is holding up, regardless of how many fingers he's actually holding up. It's the 2 + 2 = 5 scenario. And that's all this potentiality of male pregnancy is. It's just another 2 + 2 = 5 moment. Now that we've allowed ourselves to be told that 2 + 2 = 5, and we can be cancelled if we don't accept it. It can be after I watch some of the video I'm editing back that even I can think, Gary, that sounds a bit all over the shop in your thinking. Why are you trying to draw comparisons with only a layperson's knowledge of the history of Marxist thought with sovereign citizens, etc.? So I feel like I went to some oblique places for the past quarter of an hour in trying to come up with an answer as to why male pregnancy is even being discussed in Western society in the year 2026. Is any of this connected? Well, male pregnancy, it's actually the dumbest thing ever. Why is it even there as a thing? Sovereign citizen behaviour, it's actually the dumbest thing ever. Why is it even there as a thing? It's all just continual debasement of our culture through the gradual processes of a society continually critiquing itself into absurdity. And I was just trying to come up with the roots of how the West got to such a stupid psychological place. I mean, it was the academic humanities and social sciences in the West that created absurd gender ideologies. Am I right? That's where that came from. If it's not those schools of academic thought permeating through Western culture that were founded in the times and by the people mentioned earlier, why is it that other societies in other countries don't even come close to recognising such ridiculousness? In the now times, what do you think leaders like Putin or Jinping or any of the leaders of any of the Arab states actually think to themselves when they watch the Australian Parliament talk about male pregnancy? So finally, how do I think sovereign citizens are anything like the people who talk male pregnancy issues? It's the societal coddling they both receive. They both think they're the most entitled people ever. They're both disconnected from reality. They're both acting out against society. Well, not so much the trans, well, except for when they shoot people. They both talk in gibberish. They both continue to be observed, by me at least, as continuing to speak in gibberish in the face of all evidence to the contrary. They both seem to think it should be all about them and that they're exempt. I don't know, I just can't help but see them both as great examples of where society is going stupiderist. I don't know, I'm just so... But I'm a woman now. No, you're not. But I have the right to travel. Then catch the bus. All of this listening to crazy people tell their crazy stories. I wonder if there's any countries where if you continue to drive unlicensed like soft-sits do, you go to jail. And if you present for a job interview as a potentially pregnant person of transness, you go to jail. I still think they're similar. Hey guys, I'm on YouTube's naughty list still, so you could really help me out by joining my PayPal or Patreon, where you can download music of mine that you've probably never heard before. Links are down in the description. Thanks for watching.